Hi, Quest. This is Karen. I just want you to know that I really miss the sweet faces of your children.
Hi, Quest. This is Dennis. And I just want you to know that I totally miss seeing your smiling faces out in the parking lot on Sunday mornings.
Hi, Quest. This is Angela. I so miss your hugs and worshiping with you on Sundays.
Hey, Quest, it's Beth. I'm just really grateful that we have the digital stuff that we have so that we can still stay connected.
Hi, Quest. This is Mike, and I just want you to know how much I miss seeing you every Sunday morning, and want you to know that our mission hasn't changed at all. We just have to do it a little differently right now.
Hi, Quest. This is Jonathan. So good to see you all, and just hope that this week your family is growing closer to each other and to God.
Hi, Quest. This is Kevin. And I just want you to know that we really haven't changed, that we're still a people in a place where the skeptic, the inquirer, and the already convinced can find room and reason to belong and to believe and to be transformed. There's no other group of people that I'd rather be connected to. So, good to see you.
Take two.
Sorry.
Look at you.
I'm definitely connected.
Yeah, man. Well, hi, you guys. This is Kevin. I wanted to welcome you to Touchbase Tuesday. So we're going to have some things here today that I want to share with you that have been really helpful to me, and I hope they're helpful to you. So let me just start by saying what I'd encourage you to do is make sure you connect with what's called RightNow Media. And we've purchased a subscription for Quest, and it's free to each one of you. It's kind of like the Netflix of Christian Bible studies and presentations and children's stuff. There's adult stuff, men's, women's, kind of all over the map. So there's a lot of stuff on there. I think they say 25,000 different things. So there's just a ton. We thought it'd be really helpful for you to have at home during this time where you're kind of shuttered in. And maybe this would just really be good stuff for you. And one of the things that I would like to suggest you watch is a presentation called The Psychology of Crisis. It's by Dr. Henry Cloud. Dr. Cloud is someone that I have met and spent a little bit of time with, been to some of his seminars way back when he was kind of starting his ministry. I got to spend some individual time with him. It was really very enjoyable, so I've always valued what he has to say. And he made made his splash in especially a book called Boundaries, and it has helped people kind of figure out where they start and others begin and how to figure those kinds of things out. But in this presentation that he does, and he did this just a week ago, so it's connected to this whole issue of COVID-19 and the crisis we're in the midst of it. But he has also related to these kinds of issues and all sorts of other crises and helped all sorts of people, organizations, churches, ministries, you name it, on helping how to deal with these weird crises that we go through. He calls it the psychology of crisis. I think really it could be called the theology of crisis, but especially a theology about how it impacts the human experience, how it impacts the way that we're designed by God to live life. And when crises happen, we tend to have those structures or those ways that we're designed to function upset. We're put into upheaval. We're discombobulated about things. And it's really true. And that's happened from day one. It's happened even from the first day when man fell, what we call the fall of man. And the way that humans were designed to function, the way we were made to be, the way we were supposed to be before sin entered into our daily experience is now going to be kind of unfolded, I think, in these 5 things that Henry's going to talk about. So I'd encourage you to watch that. But what I'm going to do is give you kind of a brief synopsis, hopefully encourage you to watch it rather than discouraging you from watching it. But I think it was really helpful to me, and I hope it'll be helpful to you. So when he talked about those things, he started with the issue of connectedness right here. You and I were designed to be connected. You and I are relational beings. That's who God made us to be. You can remember back in Genesis, he created Adam, and then he said it wasn't good for him to be alone, so he made a suitable helper, a corresponding person, someone, because Adam needed someone who was different from him, but also alike him. And so it wasn't good for Adam to be alone, so God made Eve to be his suitable companion, to do life together. You can even go into the New Testament and see the incredible description of the fact that you and I put together are called the body of Christ. And you think that illustration through very far, and you find the incredible importance of every piece of the body functioning well so that the body as a whole functions well together. And that each of those pieces are not independent of one another, but they're connected to one another. So for my elbow to work, let's use this one, I need the lower arm to work well and the upper arm to work well. Not only that, but I need the shoulder to work well. I need the neck to be in good shape. I need everything to be going well for this elbow to do its job. So same thing in the body of Christ. The connectedness we have between each other is critically important. Now, obviously, for the body to function really well, we need to be connected to the head. And the head, scripturally, refers to Christ. He is the head of the church, and we are the body of the church. So the head gives direction to the rest of the body, but the body needs to be connected, needs to be in relationship. It needs to be connected. Therefore, in the time of crisis, these connects that we normally have, as imperfect as they might be, these connects get disrupted and they begin to get torn apart. And so we now live in these little bubbles in our homes with 2 or 3 or 4 people, but we don't have much connection with other people. Now, those connects at home sometimes can get a little tense or a little bit, there can be some tension because we're closer than we normally have been, and the kids want to get out and they want this and that, or even in our marriages, sometimes there's definite tension in the midst of this. Not only all the tension that's going on around us adds to that, but then the tension we have with each other. But that connectedness is still very, very important. So I'd encourage you, create ways to be connected to other people. The phone still works. Snail mail still works, but maybe not as helpful. Also, you can do Zoom meetings, FaceTime, all those different things that media has provided now to stay connected. Call your parents, call your kids, call your grandkids. Caribou, which is a place where you can go, especially like grandparents to their grandkids, or maybe even parents with kids, where you can play games, where you can read a book to them. It's a way to stay connected because that gets disrupted in the middle of crisis. So connections. We were made to be connected to each other. It gets disrupted in the midst of a crisis. The second thing that Henry talks about is this issue of structure, or what I'm going to call maybe even rhythms. That you and I were made to have structures in our lives. We were made to have rhythms in our lives. Just think about it. God made the sun and the moon. He made the day and the night. It's a daily structure, a daily rhythm that we become accustomed to. Normally, most people sleep during a big chunk of that nighttime. That's an important rhythm you have. Your sleep is incredibly important in order for your waking hours to be productive. So that kind of a rhythm. Just think about, too, the issue of seasons that are created. Fall, winter, spring, summer. We enjoy those rhythms. And here in St. Louis, we get all 4 of those seasons. And so rhythms in life, patterns in life are important. And a lot of those structures or a lot of those rhythms have been disrupted, turned upside down by this crisis. So you used to be able to get up, have breakfast, go to work, go to school, go get errands done. Whatever your structures may have been or your rhythms, they probably have been disrupted significantly. And so in the midst of this crisis, I encourage you to regain some of those or create new rhythms. You may have more time to spend with family. You may have more time to do some reading. Maybe there's time to do something you haven't done that you've always wanted to do. Some of you are aspiring artists, and so maybe this is a time where you could take some time in your rhythms to be creative. I'd encourage you in your rhythms, don't get so caught up in all the news because the news can become kind of a crazy maker. Pick really good spots to get good news and then leave it alone and go and do the other things of life. Maybe read a book. I'm reading one right now called Thomas Jefferson and the Tripoli Pirates. It's the very first American war that we had after the Revolutionary War. Very few people know much about it, but we began to have, there was a declared war between the Barbary Coast or the North Africa and the pirates that were part of that, as they were bothering American shipping along the European coast and especially in the Mediterranean. And so I've been reading this book, and it's really been helpful. It's been fun. So I encourage you to do something to create patterns and structures at home, in your life, in your company, whatever it might be. Because this crisis has really played horrible games with the issue of structures. Third thing that he talks about is being mindful. The mindfulness of this. Sometimes crisis kind of helps, we kind of get so caught up in it. And in fact, in psychology, they would talk about three things. One is you either fight, or you flight, or you freeze. To be mindful, the scriptures tell us to take every thought captive by the thoughts of Christ. And so our minds can begin to just run away with it. Think, well, what if? We know that the world's coming to an end, or what if I get this? Or things that we are just so afraid of. And sometimes people can either get into a fight mentality. They are just going to buck up, and they are going to fight this. And I appreciate the energy level. That's been my response so far, is to kind of fight this unseen enemy called a virus. But you can either get into fight, or other people get into flight. They just want to run away and just ignore it and just do whatever they can to act like it's not true, and they run away from this. Or some people get frozen. They just freeze up. They're so intimidated by the situation. Rather than taking every thought captive, they either fight or flight or freeze. But maybe the best response way over here would be to have faith. And it doesn't mean a blind faith. It doesn't mean kind of a dumb faith. It means a practical faith. It means an informed faith. That means a faith that comes from remembering that God has been faithful in your life time and time and time again. To remember that God has been faithful to his people all along the way. The scriptures are full of when God says, remember. Remember back. Remember when I did this. Remember when I did that. The scriptures are usually totally full. When Israel's off on their own, kind of messing around, he always says, remember back to the time that the Passover, which is we're going to celebrate here in just a few days, that God passed over this spirit of death that went over all the people. He passed over if they had had the blood of a lamb over their door. Remember back to God's protection. Remember back, Joshua, when you crossed over the River Jordan and you took rocks and piled them up, one for each of the tribes, to remember God's faithfulness. So we don't have to fight, we don't have to flight, we don't have to freeze. We can live by faith, trusting in God. But crises usually take this mindfulness and kind of messes with it, right? So, connection, structures, mindfulness. The fourth one is this, is the powerlessness. We feel so out of control when things like this happen. We were made to be people that didn't have total control because God was still in control, but that he gave us responsibilities. And it kind of connects with this last one, even competency. That we want to feel competent. Remember when God gave Adam and Eve dominion over the earth. He gave them the assignment to name everything. Why did he do that? Because he felt like they were competent. He said, yeah, you do it. I don't need to name them. You do it. We're in this together. We're a team. And so he gives them responsibility, though they were the creation and he is the creator. But he still said, you have the ability. You're competent to do this. You have power. Well, I'm giving you dominion, authority. And situations like this kind of play with that whole powerfulness. We feel so out of control. So it happens in crisis. So it happens in sin. All of a sudden, we exercise power in the wrong way at the wrong time, and we mess things up, and all of a sudden life has power over us. Well, we feel powerless in this whole thing. And we don't feel very competent in this whole thing. Because that's what crises do to people. It's what they does to all of us. And so as we deal with this COVID-19 crisis, I think it's to be reminded that these kind of crises play with the very core structures of who we are as people, who God made us to be as people. So if you've experienced that, it's because you're human, because you live in a broken world, because each one of us are broken people. And this kind of really plays games with us, and it's really challenging. But to remember that we need to know that retain our connectedness with people, to establish new sound structures. That's why we even do this Touchbase Tuesday, Touchbase Thursday, and Sunday. We wanted a pattern that you could rely on as a church, that we're going to be in touch. And then hopefully contacting each other and staying connected and having some rhythms, and eventually knowing that we take every thought captive to Christ. We don't have to fight, we don't have to flight, we don't have to freeze, but we can live by faith. And that we are not totally powerless. There are certain things we still can do. Now, we can't control everything. I wish we could. We would love to be able to control this whole crisis of this virus. And when we can't or don't, sometimes I think we want to point fingers and blame everybody else for not controlling what they couldn't control either, or at least some things they couldn't control. And so, but we can control some things in our lives, and that therefore there is a competency still that we can exercise. So in the midst of this crisis, to do what you can do, be competent in what you can be competent in. And invest yourself in the good of mankind. Because I think the greatest evangelism that's going to happen is that we would express the kindness and the deep-set sacrificial love that God has for people, and he would do it through us. And if we do that well, there will be a time and a place after this crisis is over, or as it begins to wane, that they're going to want to know, can you give me an explanation for the hope that I saw in you? Because I want that. And there will be a time, if we have really expressed or revealed the kindness of God in the midst of this chaos, that they're going to want to know where that came from. It didn't come from in us. It comes from the Christ living in us and living his life through us. Okay? So I encourage you to go and watch The Psychology of Crisis by Dr. Cloud. It'll be far better than what I said, but that's a great summary, I think, for understanding how this crisis creates upheaval and disorientation in our lives, and how we can gain that back somewhat by understanding these core ways that you and I were designed. All right? I look forward to seeing you at Touchbase Thursday. I love you guys. I hope you're well. If you need anything, please contact us. We would love to meet your needs if we can. All right. See you guys. Love you.